So today we're going to talk about detoxification and all the reasons why we should be discussing it, and more importantly, why you need to know about it and things you can do in your daily life to enhance it. If you go to our website at innovativehealthdoctors.com, you can see more of our trainings and look at a lot of our training literature to understand more advanced topics on neurologic health, pain, and wellness restoration. So when we look at complex situations and we start talking about detoxification or purification or resetting our metabolism, we want to remember that toxicity comes from many sources. And so what you're feeling might not be coming from where you think it is. Things like heavy metal toxicity can cause a variety of symptoms. EMF toxicity, electromagnetic radiation, mold, parasites, so on and so forth. Even a closed head injury can produce the symptoms of a toxic overload. So it's our job as physicians to really pay attention to what the patient's telling us and take that information and do something with it. Now, as you all know, we're very pro whole food. We understand that the body, given the right tools, can take care of itself, and that is true. However, if you look at our food supply today, it's extremely corrupt, and we don't need to go too deep into the internet to get more information on this. So if you look at, for example, GMOs Revealed as a movie, you can learn a lot about what's happened to the food. Another good movie to watch is called King Corn. You can watch Food Matters, and more productions will be coming out about why food has been altered and what it's doing to your body. And we'll also talk today briefly about some chemicals in our food and how they're affecting us. But some new information has come to light recently regarding other sources of toxicity and exposure. And one of those is coming from our pets, and we didn't really know that was an issue. But there's a really good article in Gizmodo about we should really be cautious about the foods we're giving our pets, particularly if you're feeding your pets raw food. And the reason being, a lot of these raw foods come with parasites that wouldn't normally be in your environment. And yes, these parasites can transfer from your pet to humans. It's a known fact. So we have to be a lot more careful about what we're putting in our environment because parasites can lead to more toxicity. Another good article from The Atlantic talks about all of the environmental toxicity that's ruining our brain. And this one research went in there and looked at how many IQ points we've been robbed as a nation because of toxicity. You could use Flint as an example because it's a well-known fact that lead poisoning will lower IQ. But this article is from March 2014. And so there's the link. Go ahead and view it on your own. But this whole concept of toxicity is nothing new. What is new is science is helping us understand the complexities of it, and more importantly, what to do with it. And so let's understand a little more about how it's affecting us, and then we'll talk about what we can do about it. What you're feeling in your brain a lot of times is the result of neurotoxicity. Consuming too much alcohol is a good example of neurotoxicity. But stress is a good example of a source of toxicity for your brain. So when somebody said, I just can't do this anymore, that's stress neurotoxicity. All the other usual suspects, more recently, things like transgenerational toxins. For example, if mom was a smoker, then she could have passed the heavy metal cadmium on to the baby, so on and so forth. And we're seeing viruses as transgenerational as well. Things like Lyme disease can be transgenerational. So we're under a lot of assault. We're getting hit from all angles. What do we do about it? Well, we try to do some research, and you ask your doctor, and you end up with a lot of questions because not all healthcare practitioners understand what's going on here. So I've built a nice chart for us that helps us look at this whole brain-gut axis. And that is the whole idea that your gut is really telling your brain what's going on. So from a toxicity point of view, what does that look like? Well, if you look at some symptoms that go along with brain health, for example, memory issues, brain fog, difficulty focusing, inability to sit still or focus on one subject. and we understand that that's really coming from certain regions of the brain, then we can understand that in those regions of the brain, they're affecting organs. So if we understand that smooth muscle control is controlled by the brain, then we would understand that since our gut is basically smooth muscle, if anything happens to that contraction, then you can't move your bowels regularly. So constipation becomes a major source of toxicity. Ideally, you should be moving your bowels 2 to 3 times a day. Consistency is important. And one of the reasons most of us don't do that is we're suffering from a yeast overgrowth, mainly due to the fact that we just don't slow down enough to enjoy a meal. Or we're not eating foods that allow the brain to recover. The foods are too stimulating. So that limits our ability to get rid of our food wastes, which puts more load on our liver. As that happens, your fight or flight part of the nervous system kicks in, and you might have a little bit of low back pain or a little bit of lower right quadrant pain. That starts to lead to you asking yourself, well, maybe I need a probiotic. But then you start to notice that you wake up fine, but by the end of the day, you're very swollen and bloated. And so you enter your symptoms into Google University or WebMD, and it might say that, you know what? I think that you have SIBO, S-I-B-O, small intestine bacterial overgrowth. But before you run for the hills, let's find out why that happens. As the bacteria starts to move to all the wrong places in your gut because of a nervous system dysfunction, your liver and your gallbladder start to wonder, maybe we should slow some things down. So you slow your gallbladder contractions down, which leads to more constipation, and then you stop absorbing vitamin A, D, E, and K. And as you lose your reserves of those fat-soluble vitamins, you start to lose the ability to detoxify. As that happens, the stomach and the pancreas start to panic, so they start slowing down their jobs, which means you stop absorbing and digesting protein properly, and you stop digesting and absorbing carbohydrates correctly, which leads to even more stress on the liver. As this proceeds, you lose the ability to digest fat, then you just can't calm down anymore. It leads to more inflammation in the gut, and that's where leaky gut really comes from. So if this makes sense to you, you have a better understanding of why a lot of these issues really start in the brain and go to the gut, or vice versa. You could have had food poisoning or taken an antibiotic and triggered all of this. The reason we look at this in practice is I see a lot of people with closed head injuries who manifest all of these symptoms. And so remember, any issue in the brain is really a detoxification issue. Another way to look at it is any problem in the gut leads to a whole host of symptoms and diagnoses that you don't want. And it all stems from the vagus nerve. Now, if you've been adjusted by a chiropractor before, you've had your vagus nerve stimulated. So chiropractic still plays a large role in this process. We've got to maintain healthy nervous function. When we say toxicity, most of us think about environmental toxicity, things in our food, things in our water, and that's true. We know that the World Health Organization is watching this stuff. We know that a lot of our newer diseases, particularly autoimmune disease and cancer, are related to the changes in our DNA caused by pesticides. Now, we've got the studies to prove it. 1954 study showed a 4,000% increase in cancer. 2005, we're seeing the same research done again. We need more research on the topic, and we need doctors to actually read the research. As you're working in your yard or preparing for spring, and you're working on pesky weeds, remember that everything you put on a weed that kills it eventually ends up back in our food supply. So pesticides are a real problem. We know that household pesticides are going to alter the immune system. They're going to change our gut. They are going to change the way your immune system perceives the environment. So this begs the argument for organic food. We should be consuming foods that are as low pesticide as possible. Problem is, in the Midwest, these things are everywhere. So one of the key herbicides, atrazine, that's used primarily in the production of corn, has been shown to cause asexual problems in people, meaning guys become more like girls, girls become more like guys. Mitochondrial dysfunction, which means you start to have fatigue and chronic pain, and the insulin resistance, which is really another word for type 2 diabetes and obesity, all from a simple herbicide. And so we know where it is, right? Identify the problem. So 1997, this was the known usage of this herbicide. And you'll notice that the majority of it is used on corn. A 2007 data shows that the usage has increased. And since we live up here, our water supply is contaminated for sure. When we look at Roundup or glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup, it is systemic throughout the United States. It's in our groundwater. It's in most of your grains, particularly corn. And when you look at the foods that have it, we're looking at corn and soy. And so we have to be very cautious about what's going in our body and what's going in your yard. So let me make a plea for everybody to stop using Roundup. We know it causes cancer. It's banned throughout the world, except in a few countries like Canada and the United States. So what does the rest of the world know that we don't? We have to ask better questions. Heavy metals have become a major issue lately because of their toxic exposure, and it's not just lead. When you look at all the heavy metals, drinking water is the #1 source for most people. When we say heavy metals, a lot of people think, oh, it's mercury. Well, mercury is present in our environment, and the #1 source of mercury is actually household dust. If you still have mercury in your mouth, you may want to set aside some time to talk to your dentist about having that removed slowly. Copper is a major issue, as is cadmium. Cadmium is #1 from cigarette smoke. And we all know about lead. But realize that some of your supplements that you get from the grocery store, particularly things like magnesium or calcium tablets, can be contaminated with lead. None of the supplements we use are, we know because they're third-party tested. But a lot of the cheaper supplements that are being imported from China are contaminated with heavy metals. You can use blood, urine, and hair to test for heavy metals. More frequently, we see parasitic toxicity. A lot of symptoms for parasites. If you want to do an interesting news search, you can just Google 5-foot tapeworm from sushi and read an article about a gentleman in Fresno, California, who pulled a 5.5-foot tapeworm out of his rear end, and then he admitted to eating sushi every day. So caution with sushi and any raw food. If you are having these symptoms, we need to have a discussion about parasites and what to do about them. All of these things produce toxicity in your body. It's not just the environmental toxicity. In our office, we are experts in epigenetics. We can take apart a 23andMe faster than anybody, and we can help you understand that just because you were born with genes doesn't mean you're going to express them. Remember that the environment is the trigger for that gene. So in deficiency states or toxicity states, you can actually turn on bad genes. And one of the nice things about a systemic detox is we can turn off bad genes and turn on good genes. It's very easy to do, and it just requires some basic lifestyle management. So as an organism, as a mammal, because we are mammals, we have 3 ways of dealing with these things. Remember, toxins are not just what we are exposed to, we also make toxins internally. If you've ever had way too much Mexican one night and maybe a little too much Bell's beer, you understand what kind of toxins can be made internally. So we have 3 options. We can bury them in our fat, which leads to obesity. If you're not obese, your body will then have to bury them in an organ tissue, typically your bone or your liver, sometimes your brain. And if we're healthy, strong, well-rested, and relaxed, the body actually has the ability to just eliminate them. So those are our 3 options. Toxicity is easy to figure out. You don't need a lot of fancy blood tests or surveys. You just got to figure, well, how much is going in minus how much can I really get rid of? and that's your toxic burden. Reducing that burden is the key to healthy detoxification. So the principles are pretty straightforward. Number one, stop putting bad things in. Stop thinking bad things. Clear your head, clear your mind, meditate, sweat, exercise, all the things you know you're supposed to do. Make sure you're moving your bowels. Make sure you're drinking clean water, filtered clean water. Make sure your body has the ability to protect itself from all of the toxicity that it's working with every day. Plants like turmeric, drinks like green tea, organic coffee, red wine, grapeseed, blueberries, all very useful for creating an antioxidant reserve. Make sure you have the energy to do this. That's why exercise and sweating is so key here, because it gives you the energy to get this done. And help your body do this on a regular basis by consuming healthy whole food. We don't have the time to get into the benefits of a keto diet, but in a keto state, this whole program starts to work a little better. Only if you're consuming the cleanest food available. And one of the mistakes that they see in the keto diet is people don't eat the cleanest animal products. And it's very difficult to be a vegan keto expert. So before you do keto, talk to us about looking at detoxification. Don't forget to do some stress management, and by all means, clean out the cupboards. All right, so the 4S program. Stop putting junk in. Read those labels. Even their supplements could have things you don't need. So if you're taking an over-the-counter protein shake or meal replacement, read the label. If it's got dairy in it, it doesn't belong in a detox. You have to do amazing things to certain powders chemically to make them taste good. There's a reason medicine's supposed to taste bad, okay? So if it tastes too good, there's a reason for it. Support all your organs, get a massage, get an adjustment, sweat, jump up and down on a trampoline. That's a good way to help stimulate the lymphatics and eliminate toxins, but also help coach your family members on how to do this type of 4S system all the time. We shouldn't just detox once a year. We should be detoxing all year. The main reason is we've never been under such a burden like this before. So this is detox in a box. This is how it works. You're exposed to things, or you manufactured things that are nasty and have to be eliminated. You use these chemical reactions to do it. You also use all these nutrients to make it work. So this is the fuel that makes the first step of detox work. Many of us genetically have defects in these enzymes. So if you don't respond well to caffeine or anesthesia, or morphine makes you throw up, or you respond very weird to medications or supplements, you probably have some quirks in the genetics on this side, and that needs to be looked at before you detox. The second phase involves all of these chemical processes. Same thing. About 50% of us have genetic quirks on this pathway, and we need all these amino acids to make it work. Unfortunately, if you're not eating enough protein and digesting your protein, you don't get these amino acids. So one of the secrets to healthy detox is making sure you're getting enough protein. Now, if all of this is done correctly, you're still going to create things that need to be eliminated. And they are going to be eliminated either through your stool or your urine or your sweat. In some cases, you can actually breathe these things out. Now, if anything goes wrong in this system, you end up with these things, reactive oxygen intermediates. If you can't manage those, you end up with tissue damage. And this is why some people don't feel very well when they start a detox. So that needs to be addressed and managed immediately. And this is one of the reasons that you shouldn't just go to the grocery store and buy a detox in a box kit, because it doesn't look at this process correctly. One of the simplest ways to detox in the past was just to do a 3-day fast. Unfortunately, if you're fasting, you're not getting these amino acids. So today, most of us are in a nutrient deficient state. So we have to work on nutrient support if we're going to detoxify. If we're not eating the right foods, you're going to detoxify in an imbalanced state. And what that leads to is more and more of these guys, which can lead to things you don't want down the road, like arthritis, certain types of cancer, Alzheimer's, dementia, etc. So keep that in mind. You want to be a healthy detoxifier. You don't want to rearrange the deck furniture on the Titanic, so to speak. Another way to look at this, since we're talking about the liver, is come at it from a Chinese medicine point of view. And those of you that have been in the office know we do work with Chinese medicine. And I want you to take a look at this, and feel free to pause this in the video, but take a look at the emotional components of detoxification. So in many cases, as we're going through a metabolic reset, you might notice a little bit of rage coming up, or just not being yourself. People might comment on what's going on. So there's a lot to emotional health, and we do address that in the office using some pretty advanced techniques. Another way to look at it is meddling. If you're stuck in this mode, we really need to look at supporting your liver. Physically, if this is you, we need to spend more time looking at your liver. Okay? Another way to address your liver symptomatically is, if you can't fall asleep, we need to look at your liver. If you can't stay asleep, we need to look at your liver. So lots to pay attention here. It's a very interesting chart. If you want to know more about Chinese medicine, send us an email. We'll do a quick webinar on that. So we got to eat some real foods on a daily basis to make sure we stay out of trouble. You need healthy bile flow. These are some 4 key food groups to keep in mind for healthy bile. Can't go wrong with beets. You want to make sure you eat the root and maybe a little bit of the greens. Artichokes go a long way for making bile. Have some different kinds of greens in your salad. And if you've been on Facebook lately, you've noticed that you keep coming across a video where people are dumping lemons into a blender with hot water and drinking it. Good idea, bad video. Don't juice the peel. You should only have the lemon juice, the fruit, in hot water. Please don't juice the peel. It's quite toxic. But that will help move some bile. So a quick home remedy for constipation is squeeze a couple lemons into some hot water, just the juice, not the peel, and sip that hot water every morning. You'll get some bile moving. As the bile moves, the poisons start to move out of the body. You start to move your bowels healthfully. Now we got to talk about making glutathione. And remember, your body is very good at detoxifying itself on its own, but it needs all the tools to do it. So we've got to give it the right tools and the right opportunity. Asparagus is one way to help your body make more glutathione. Your cruciferous vegetables will do the same. In many cases, we'll actually recommend glutathione as a supplement, but it can only be dispensed in its liposomal form because it reacts with oxygen. So some of us need more help with glutathione. We might recommend it supplementally, but make sure you're eating some foods that support it as well. You can't go wrong with a big old omelet. So throw some eggs together with all these vegetables and you'll have a glutathione meal. Okay? Leaky gut is the main reason we see people constantly toxic. And there's a lot of bad information about leaky gut out there. Most of it's too rudimentary to really give you the whole story. So what I've done is put the main suspects of leaky gut into one chart for you. So we can think about what diet is doing. For example, if you gorge out on pizza and beer at Buffalo Wild Wings one night, and those inflammatory foods have to get detoxified through the colon, that's going to lead to inflammation. Leaky gut is really just inflammation. But we know that diet will cause it, but so can medications. So if you've had to go on a steroid for breathing issues or, say, poison ivy, antibiotics, antacids, so on and so forth, even the birth control pill can cause leaky gut. Classic infections that we've talked about, any kind of yeast infection can cause leaky gut. We know stress can cause leaky gut. Any hormonal imbalances, particularly if you're not making enough hormones, that can lead to inflammation of the gut. So if you've got thyroid issues, or you're in menopause, or guys, you've got low T, we've got to look at the gut because you're poking holes in it. Any trauma to the brain, whiplash, you've bumped your head a few times. I ask people, hey, have you ever been concussed? And they say, well, I don't remember. Well, that's the joke, because if you don't remember, that's the hallmark of a concussion. You were knocked out. So that can cause leaky gut, which leads to more detox issues. And anybody that's got an autoimmune disease, you have to remember that all autoimmune diseases start in the gut. And any gut issue is really a toxicity issue. So all good detox programs will look at the gut as well as the rest of the detoxification organs. Now, if you want to start with just the gut, I have built a pretty cool dysbiosis protocol that will reset this whole system. So talk to one of our doctors about how to do that. As you know, we practice biologic, individualized medicine nutritionally. So we can handle pretty much anything coming our way when it comes to putting together a system for toxicity. At the end of the day, though, our mission is to do things as naturally as possible, even though we live in an unnatural world. And so we've got the systems to get us back to nature and survive the environment that we're in without causing future problems. And more importantly, feel better, have more energy, and enjoy our day in a stress-free way. I hope that was useful. Again, check out our website, Facebook page, YouTube channel, and stay tuned for more coming your way.